18. Natalie Wood, 1938–1981. Few mysteries in the history of Hollywood have endured with such agonizing persistence as the death of Natalie Wood. She was the quintessential child star who successfully navigated the treacherous waters of adolescence to become a screen legend, starring in classics like Rebel Without a Cause and West Side Story. Yet, for all her cinematic triumphs, her story is now inextricably linked to a dark, cold weekend in November 1981, and a grave located in the heart of Los Angeles that continues to draw visitors seeking answers that may never come. Natalie Wood is buried in Pierce Brothers Westwood Village Memorial Park, a small, almost hidden cemetery tucked away behind the towering skyscrapers of Wilshire Boulevard. It is a quiet sanctuary, surprisingly compact given the magnitude of the stars interred there. To find her grave, one must walk to the center of the main lawn. There, beneath the shade of a large tree, lies a flat marker that reads simply, Natalie Wood Wagner. It is a modest headstone for a woman of her stature, often adorned with coins left by visitors, a tradition meant to pay respect to the departed. But while the setting is peaceful, the circumstances that brought her there are anything but. The events leading to her burial began on Thanksgiving weekend, 1981. Natalie, her husband Robert Wagner, and her co-star Christopher Walken were aboard the couple's yacht, the Splendor, anchored off Santa Catalina Island. On the night of November 29, the three actors, along with the boat's captain, Dennis Davern, had been drinking heavily. The atmosphere on the boat was volatile. Witnesses on nearby boats later reported hearing a woman yelling for help in the darkness, and reports surfaced of a heated argument between Wagner and Walken, with a glass bottle being smashed in a fit of rage. Sometime around midnight, Natalie Wood vanished. When her body was discovered the next morning, floating face down in the water a mile away from the yacht, she was dressed in a flannel nightgown, socks, and a red down jacket. The initial investigation concluded that she had accidentally slipped while trying to board or secure the yacht's inflatable dinghy, the Prince Valiant. The coroner ruled the death an accidental drowning, citing her intoxication as a contributing factor. The case was closed, and the world mourned the tragic, clumsy end of a beloved icon. However, the silence surrounding that night did not last. For decades, whispers of foul play circulated. Why would a woman known to be terrified of dark water, a fear instilled in her by a fortune teller in her youth, attempt to take a dinghy out alone in the middle of the night? Why did the captain, Dennis Davern, wait hours before calling the Coast Guard? In 2011, 30 years after she was laid to rest in Westwood, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department reopened the investigation. This decision was driven by new statements from Davern, who claimed he had lied to police in 1981 and that a violent fight between Wood and Wagner had immediately preceded her disappearance. The autopsy report was re-examined, and a shocking revision was made. The cause of death was changed from accidental drowning to drowning and other undetermined factors. The updated coroner's report noted the presence of bruising on her arms and knee, as well as a scratch on her neck, which investigators stated could have occurred before she entered the water. This suggested the possibility of an assault. In 2018, investigators named Robert Wagner a person of interest, stating that his version of events did not add up. Yet no charges were ever filed. The grave in Westwood remains a focal point for this unresolved tension, a final resting place for a woman whose last moments were filled with fear and confusion, the truth of which lies buried deeper than the casket itself. 17. George Reeves, 1914–1959. If you travel to Altadena, California, to the Mountain View Cemetery and Mausoleum, you will find the final resting place of the man who was, for a generation, the only Superman that mattered. George Reeves lies in a niche in the mausoleum, his urn bearing his name and the dates of a life cut tragically short. To the public, he was the man of steel, bulletproof and invincible. But the man inside the suit was vulnerable, and his death in 1959 remains one of Hollywood's most contentious suicides. George Reeves had spent years trying to break out of the typecasting that the Adventures of Superman television series had imposed on him. By 1959, he was engaged to a socialite named Leonore Lemon and was planning to direct, looking for a new chapter in his life. However, in the early hours of June 16, 1959, a gunshot rang out from the upstairs bedroom of his home in Benedict Canyon. The police arrived to find Reeves naked in bed, dead from a single gunshot wound to the head. A Luger pistol lay between his feet. Downstairs, Leonore Lemon and a group of guests had been drinking. According to the official report, Lemon had bizarrely narrated the event as it happened. When a noise was heard upstairs, she reportedly said, "He's going to shoot himself." When the shot was fired, she declared, "See? He's done it." The coroner ruled it a suicide, citing depression over his stalled career. But the physical evidence at the scene told a more complicated story, one that continues to haunt those who visit his niche in Altadena. First, there were the shell casings. 2 bullets were found embedded in the bedroom floor and 1 in the ceiling, in addition to the one that killed him. The trajectory and the number of shots fired in the room suggested a struggle or a chaotic scene, not a quiet suicide. Furthermore, there were no fingerprints found on the gun, not even Reeves's own. It had been wiped clean. If he had shot himself, how could the gun be devoid of prints? The paraffin test, used to detect gunshot residue on hands, was never performed on Reeves. The guests downstairs waited a significant amount of time before calling the police, a delay that has never been adequately explained. Rumors swirled that Reeves had been a victim of a professional hit. He had recently ended a long-term affair with Toni Mannix, the wife of Eddie Mannix, a notorious MGM studio fixer with alleged ties to the mob. The theory goes that a broken-hearted Toni, or an enraged Eddie, ordered the hit on the invincible Superman. Despite the glaring inconsistencies, the case was never officially pursued as a homicide. George Reeves's mother refused to accept the suicide ruling and hired private investigators, but they hit walls of silence. Today, the niche in Mountain View Cemetery stands as a monument to a man who could fly on screen but was trapped in a web of jealousy and violence in reality. The suicide of George Reeves is widely regarded by forensic experts today as a staged crime scene, yet on paper, it remains a closed case, leaving the Man of Steel's death an open wound in Hollywood history. 16. Bob Crane, 1928-1978. Bob Crane was the charming, wisecracking star of Hogan's Heroes, a man whose public image was that of a wholesome American dad. But the man buried in Westwood Village Memorial Park, the same cemetery as Natalie Wood, lived a double life that led to a brutal, unsolved end. His grave, originally located in Oakwood Memorial Park, was moved to Westwood in 1999 by his family. The marker features a picture of Crane and his second wife, Sigrid Valdez, with the inscription, "Hogan and Hilda, together forever." It is a serene tribute that belies the gruesome violence of his exit. In June 1978, Crane was in Scottsdale, Arizona, performing in a dinner theater production. On the morning of June 29, he was found bludgeoned to death in his apartment. The weapon was never found, though investigators believed it to be a camera tripod. An electrical cord was tied around his neck. The brutality of the attack was shocking. It was a crime of immense rage. Crane's hidden life involved a compulsion for videotaping his sexual encounters with women, a hobby he pursued with the help of his friend, John Carpenter, not the famous director. Carpenter was a video equipment salesman who traveled with Crane, often participating in these sessions. As Crane tried to distance himself from Carpenter and this lifestyle in the late 1970s, tensions between the two men grew. Police found blood smears in Carpenter's rental car that matched Crane's blood type, a rare type. But DNA testing did not exist in 1978, and the evidence was deemed circumstantial. The case went cold for over a decade. In 1992, prosecutors finally charged Carpenter with the murder. During the trial, the defense attacked the mishandling of evidence by the Scottsdale police in the original investigation, including the loss of the sample from the car. Carpenter was acquitted in 1994 and died 4 years later, maintaining his innocence. To this day, the murder of Bob Crane remains officially unsolved. Visitors to his grave in Westwood often discuss the friendship theory, that the man who knew Crane's darkest secrets was the one who silenced him. The contrast between the smiling face on his tombstone and the bloody, unresolved nature of his death makes his grave a chilling stop for those obsessed with Hollywood's dark side. 15. Thelma Todd, 1906–1935. Thelma Todd was known as the Ice Cream Blonde, a comedic powerhouse who starred alongside the Marx Brothers and Buster Keaton. She was vibrant, successful, and ran a popular roadside cafe in Pacific Palisades. Today, her remains are far from the California coast. She was cremated, and her ashes were placed in her mother's casket in Bellevue Cemetery in Lawrence, Massachusetts. However, the mystery of her death remains firmly rooted in Los Angeles. On the morning of December 16, 1935, Thelma Todd was found dead in her chocolate-colored Lincoln Phaeton convertible, parked inside the garage of the home of her lover and business partner, Roland West. She was dressed in a sequined evening gown, slumped over the wheel. The engine was not running, but the ignition was on. The coroner ruled that she died of carbon monoxide poisoning. The circumstances, however, were baffled. Thelma had a broken nose and bruising around her throat, injuries that the autopsy glossed over or attributed to the steering wheel. If she had simply fallen asleep with the car running to keep warm, as the official theory suggested, why were there signs of violence? Witnesses claimed to have seen her alive well after the time the coroner said she died. But the darkest cloud hung over Roland West. West was a controlling figure who had reportedly locked Thelma out of the house that night because she arrived late from a party. The theory posits that she went to the garage to warm up, but many believe West may have closed the garage door on her, either to scare her or to kill her. Years later, on his deathbed, West reportedly confessed to a friend, "I locked her out," implying his actions led to her death, though whether it was murder or manslaughter remains ambiguous. Adding to the intrigue were rumors of mob involvement. Lucky Luciano and other gangsters were allegedly pressuring Todd to let them use her cafe as a gambling front, and she had refused. While less substantiated than the West theory, the mob angle keeps the hot toddy mystery alive. Her grave in Massachusetts is a quiet, distant end for a woman who was the life of the Hollywood party, silenced in a garage in 1935. 14. William Desmond Taylor, 1872–1922. Before the Black Dahlia, there was William Desmond Taylor. His death is the grandfather of all Hollywood unsolved mysteries. Taylor was a distinguished director, a man of refinement and status. He is interred in the Cathedral Mausoleum at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, a grand and Gothic resting place that befits a man of his era. His crypt is a place of pilgrimage for historians, for his murder effectively ended the age of innocence in Hollywood. On the morning of February 1, 1922, Taylor was found dead in his bungalow at the Alvarado Court Apartments. He had been shot once in the back. The scene was a circus. By the time the police arrived, studio executives were already there, allegedly burning documents and rearranging evidence to protect their stars. The investigation unearthed a scandal that destroyed careers. It was revealed that Taylor was the object of affection for the young starlet Mary Miles Minter, whose embroidered nightgown was found in his closet. Her mother, Charlotte Shelby, a domineering stage mom, owned a .38 caliber pistol, the same caliber used to kill Taylor. Shelby's erratic behavior and the fact that she had threatened other directors who got close to her daughter made her a prime suspect. Then there was Mabel Normand, the comedy legend and friend of Taylor, who was the last person to see him alive. She had visited him to pick up a book, and he had walked her to her car. Moments after she drove away, a shot rang out. Perhaps the strangest detail was the doctor, who appeared at the scene immediately after the body was found, declared Taylor had died of a stomach hemorrhage, and then vanished into the crowd, never to be seen again. When the coroner turned the body over, the bullet hole in the back was obvious. Despite a massive manhunt and the ruin of Minter's and Norman's careers, no one was ever charged. The Hollywood Forever Cemetery holds his bones, but the truth of who walked into that bungalow and pulled the trigger in 1922 was likely burned in a studio fireplace hours before the police ever took a statement. 13. Karen Kupchinet, 1941–1963. In the Memorial Park Cemetery in Skokie, Illinois, lies Karine Kupchinet, a young actress whose death is often overshadowed by the larger historical event that happened the same week. Karine was the daughter of Irv Kupchinet, a famous Chicago newspaper columnist. Her death occurred in West Hollywood, but she was brought back home to Illinois for burial. Karine was found dead in her apartment on November 28, 1963, Thanksgiving Day. This was just 6 days after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. She had been strangled. Her body was found lying on the couch, and the coroner determined that her hyoid bone had been broken, a classic sign of strangulation. The mystery of Karen Kupcinet involves a bizarre intersection of Hollywood tragedy and conspiracy theory. Because her death occurred so close to the JFK assassination, some researchers, notably Penn Jones Jr., attempted to link her to the president's death. The theory alleged that a woman placed a call from the area of Oxnard, California, 20 minutes before the assassination, warning that the president was going to be killed. Conspiracy theorists tried to claim this caller was Karen, and that she was silenced because she knew too much. However, the more grounded theories focus on her personal life. She had been having dinner with actor Mark Goddard and his wife the night she died and was reportedly acting erratically. Notes found in her apartment reflected a troubled state of mind. 2 other actors, Andrew Prine and David Lang, were questioned, as was the unsolved nature of the crime scene, which showed no forced entry. Despite her father's fame and influence, the case went cold. The strangulation of a 22-year-old girl became a footnote to a national tragedy, leaving her grave in Skokie as a silent testament to a crime lost in the chaos of 1963. 12. Elizabeth Short, 1924–1947. While technically an aspiring actress rather than an established star, Elizabeth Short, known posthumously as the Black Dahlia, is the grim patron saint of Hollywood unsolved mysteries. She lies in Mountain View Cemetery in Oakland, California. Her grave is often adorned with black flowers, a nod to the moniker given to her by the press. Elizabeth's body was found on January 15, 1947, in a vacant lot in Leimert Park, Los Angeles. The brutality of the crime is legendary. She was bisected at the waist, drained of blood, and her face was slashed into a ghastly smile. The sheer horror of the mutilation suggested a killer with surgical skill or a deeply disturbed mind. The investigation was one of the largest in LAPD history. Hundreds of suspects were considered, from local transients to the horrifying Dr. George Hodel, whose own son later accused him of the crime. Hodel ran a venereal disease clinic and had bugged conversations where he seemingly admitted to killing his secretary and the Black Dahlia. Despite the mountains of evidence and the endless parade of confessors, the case remains open. Elizabeth Short came to Hollywood to find fame. She found it only in death. Her grave in Oakland is far removed from the city that consumed her, yet her name remains the most famous unsolved homicide in California history. 11. Brandon Lee, 1965–1993. In Lakeview Cemetery in Seattle, Washington, 2 graves sit side by side, attracting martial arts fans and movie lovers from around the globe. One belongs to Bruce Lee and the other to his son, Brandon Lee. Brandon's death in 1993 is a tragedy that blurs the line between gross negligence and mystery, largely due to the eerie parallels with his father's death and the plot of the movie he was filming. Brandon was on the verge of superstardom filming The Crow in North Carolina. On March 31, 1993, during a scene where his character is shot, the prop gun fired a real projectile. The gun had been improperly loaded. In a previous scene, a dummy cartridge, with a bullet but no powder, had become lodged in the barrel. When the gun was loaded with a blank, powder but no bullet, for the shooting scene, the explosion of the blank propelled the lodged bullet out of the barrel with lethal force. Brandon was struck in the abdomen and died hours later. The shooting was ruled an accident caused by negligence. However, the mystery stems from the Lee family curse. Rumors persisted that the triads or other enemies of his father had sabotaged the set. The fact that The Crow deals with a man returning from the dead to avenge his own murder added a layer of macabre synchronicity that fueled conspiracy theories. While the police closed the case as accidental, the grave in Seattle represents a life cut short by a series of mistakes so improbable that many find it hard to accept them as mere coincidence. 10. Jack Nance, 1943–1996. Jack Nance was the face of cult cinema, the star of David Lynch's Eraserhead. He was a beloved character actor known for his quirks and his role in Twin Peaks. His death, however, was as strange and disjointed as a Lynch film. Nance is buried in Rose Hills Memorial Park in Whittier, California. On December 29, 1996, Nance met friends for lunch with a visible, ugly bruise under his eye. When asked about it, he told them a story about a brawl outside a Winchell's Donut store in South Pasadena earlier that morning. He claimed he had chastised some young men who were being rowdy, and one of them had punched him in the face. He brushed off the injury, complaining only of a headache. He went home, lay down, and never woke up. He died the next morning of a subdural hematoma, a brain bleed caused by the punch. The mystery lies in the identity of the assailants. The fight outside the donut shop was never fully reconstructed by police. No witnesses came forward to identify the young men. Nance, in his typical fashion, had downplayed the event, failing to realize the punch had killed him. He essentially walked away from his own murder. The donut shop murder remains unsolved, and Nance's grave holds the secret of who threw the fatal punch that took away one of Hollywood's most unique faces. 9. Barbara Colby, 1939 to 1975. Barbara Colby was a rising star in the 1970s, known for her role on The Mary Tyler Moore Show and the spin-off Phyllis. She was a talented comedic actress with a bright future. Her death was random, senseless, and completely unsolved. Her final resting place is not widely publicized and is believed to be a private family interment or cremation, but the memory of her death haunts the streets of Venice, California. On July 24, 1975, Colby and her colleague, James Kiernan, were walking to their car after an acting class in Venice. They were approached by two men in a van. Without warning or provocation, the men shot both Colby and Kiernan. Colby died instantly. Kiernan survived long enough to give police a description of the shooters, but died shortly after. Kiernan told police that the shooting was unprovoked and that the men had not tried to rob them. They simply shot them and drove away. It was a drive-by shooting before the term was common. Detectives found no motive. Colby had no enemies, no drug debts, and no shady connections. It appeared to be a thrill kill. Despite the description provided by Kiernan, the two men were never caught. The complete lack of motive made the investigation incredibly difficult. Barbara Colby was erased from the screen in a split second of random violence, and her killer or killers remained free, leaving a void in the entertainment world that was never filled. 8. Peter Ivers, 1946–1983. Peter Ivers was the host of New Wave Theater, a cult figure in the Los Angeles punk and underground music scene, and a brilliant songwriter who wrote In Heaven for the film Eraserhead. He was a connector, a man who knew everyone. His death in 1983 sent a shockwave through the counterculture. Ivers is buried in Cedar Park Cemetery in Emerson, New Jersey, far from the loft in downtown LA where he met his end. On March 3, 1983, Ivers was found bludgeoned to death in his apartment. He had been beaten with a hammer. The scene was chaotic, but what happened after the discovery is what makes the case truly maddening. Because Ivers was so well loved and his apartment was a social hub, his friends arrived at the scene before the police secured it. In a misguided act of grief or confusion, they reportedly cleaned up the apartment, potentially destroying crucial evidence. They contaminated the crime scene, making the police's job nearly impossible. Theories abound regarding his death. Some say he interrupted a burglary. Others suggest a personal vendetta within the punk scene. The LAPD investigation was criticized for being lackluster, with officers allegedly dismissing the case because it involved a punk rocker. Despite the high profile of his friends, including David Lynch and Harold Ramis, the case went cold. The hammer-wielding killer of Peter Ivers was never found, leaving a legacy of artistic brilliance cut short by brutal, unsolved violence. 7. Thomas Ince, 1880–1924. Thomas Ince was a silent film mogul, the father of the Western, and a man who revolutionized the studio system. His death is the subject of one of Hollywood's most whispered legends, the Hearst yacht scandal. Ince was cremated, and his funeral was held at the Hollywood Cemetery, now Hollywood Forever. But the true cause of his death is the mystery. In November 1924, Ince was a guest on the Oneida, the private yacht of newspaper tycoon William Randolph Hearst. Other guests included Charlie Chaplin and Hearst's mistress, Marion Davies. The official story is that Ince suffered severe indigestion or a heart attack aboard the boat, was taken ashore, and died at home. The unofficial story, which has persisted for a century, is that Hearst shot Ince. The rumor posits that Hearst, jealous of an alleged affair between his mistress Marion Davies and Charlie Chaplin, found the two in a compromising position. Hearst allegedly aimed a gun at Chaplin but missed, hitting Ince instead. The morning after the trip, the headlines in Hearst's own newspapers screamed, "Movie producer shot on Hearst yacht," only to be pulled and replaced with headlines about Ince falling ill. The body was cremated quickly, preventing a later autopsy. No police investigation was ever conducted aboard the Oneida. The sheer power of Hearst allowed him to potentially bury a murder. While Ince's official cause of death was heart failure, the legend of the bullet meant for Chaplin remains the accepted truth in Hollywood lore. 6. Albert Dekker, 1905–1968. Albert Dekker was a character actor known for his intensity, appearing in films like Dr. Cyclops and The Wild Bunch. He was also a former California state assemblyman. He is buried in the Garden of Memories Cemetery in Salinas, California. His death in 1968 is one of the most bizarre and disturbing in Hollywood history. Dekker was found dead in the bathroom of his Hollywood apartment. The door was locked from the inside. He was found hanging, but the scene was grotesque. He was bound with leather straps, wearing women's lingerie, and had hypodermic needles in his arm. His body was covered in graffiti written in lipstick. The coroner ruled it an accidental death resulting from autoerotic asphyxiation. However, the complexity of the bindings led many to question how he could have tied himself up so elaborately. The lipstick graffiti was never fully explained, nor was the missing cash and camera equipment from his apartment. Was it a sex game gone wrong with a partner who fled, or was it a murder staged to look like a deviant accident? The accidental ruling closed the file, but the details of the scene suggest a second person was present who left Dekker to die and then robbed him. It remains a sordid, confusing end for a respected actor. 5. Virginia Rappe, 1891–1921. Virginia Rappe is buried in Hollywood Forever Cemetery. She was a young silent film actress whose death sparked the first major Hollywood scandal, destroying the career of one of the world's biggest stars, Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle. In September 1921, Rappe attended a party in Arbuckle's suite at the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco. She fell violently ill during the party and died days later of a ruptured bladder and peritonitis. Arbuckle was accused of raping her, with the prosecution claiming his weight caused the rupture during the assault. Arbuckle was tried 3 times. The first 2 trials ended in hung juries. The third trial acquitted him and issued a formal apology, stating there was no evidence of a crime. The defense argued that Rappe had a chronic condition, cystitis, that was aggravated by alcohol, or that the rupture was caused by a botched illegal abortion prior to the party. Though Arbuckle was legally cleared, the mystery of exactly what happened in that hotel room killed Virginia Rappe. Was it a brutal assault, a tragic medical accident, or something else? Rappe's voice was lost in the media frenzy, and her grave remains a monument to a tragedy that changed the public perception of Hollywood forever. 4. Karl Alfalfa, Switzer, 1927–1959. Karl Switzer, famous for playing Alfalfa in The Little Rascals, struggled to find work as an adult. He is buried in Hollywood Forever Cemetery. His death in 1959 is often cited as self-defense, but the details suggest a cold-blooded killing. Switzer was involved in a dispute over a lost hunting dog and $50. He went to the home of Moses Stilts to collect the money. A fight ensued. Stilts claimed Switzer attacked him with a knife, and he shot Switzer in self-defense. The police accepted this story, and Stilts was not charged. However, decades later, the stepson of Stilts, who was present, claimed that Switzer never had a knife. He alleged that Switzer was unarmed and that Stilts shot him in a rage. A small penknife found at the scene was allegedly planted. If true, the lovable Alfalfa was murdered in cold blood over $50, and his killer walked free. 3. Bobby Fuller, 1942-1966. Bobby Fuller was a rock and roll star and actor, famous for I Fought the Law. He is buried in Forest Lawn Memorial Park, Hollywood Hills. In July 1966, just as his band was taking off, Fuller was found dead in his car parked outside his apartment in Hollywood. His body was covered in gasoline, and an open gas can was found in the car. The police ruled it a suicide, suggesting he drank the gasoline. This theory was ridiculed by everyone who knew him. Fuller was happy and successful. Furthermore, his body was in advanced rigor mortis, suggesting he had died elsewhere and been moved to the car. The suicide theory was eventually changed to accidental, but the presence of the gasoline and the condition of the body pointed to a mob hit or a personal vendetta. The I Fought the Law singer ended up a victim of a lawless crime that has never been solved. 2. Christa Helm, 1949-1977. Christa Helm was an aspiring actress and a woman who kept dangerous company. Her death is a deep cut in the unsolved mystery genre. While her specific gravesite is obscure, likely a family plot in Wisconsin or Milwaukee, her death in West Hollywood is legendary among sleuths. In February 1977, Helm was found stabbed to death on a street in West Hollywood. She had been attacked with a butcher knife. Helm was known for keeping a sex diary that detailed her encounters with famous and powerful men. This diary went missing after her death. The theft of the diary suggests a clear motive: silence. Who was in the diary? The list of suspects ranged from studio heads to Shah of Iran's relatives. The brutality of the stabbing and the missing evidence point to a desperate need to keep Christa quiet. Her murder remains entirely cold. 1. Marilyn Monroe, 1926-1962. The most famous grave in Hollywood, and perhaps the world, belongs to Marilyn Monroe. She lies in a crypt at Westwood Village Memorial Park, the same small cemetery that houses Natalie Wood and Bob Crane. Her death in August 1962 is the ultimate unsolved mystery, despite the official ruling of probable suicide by barbiturate overdose. The timeline of that night is fractured. The time of death, the time the body was found, and the time the police were called do not align. Her housekeeper, Eunice Murray, changed her story multiple times. Robert Kennedy, the Attorney General, was rumored to have visited her that day to retrieve a diary or end an affair. Forensic anomalies fuel the fire. There was no pill residue in her stomach, despite the high levels of drugs in her blood, leading to the theory of a forced enema or injection. The red diary she supposedly kept vanished. Was it the Kennedy family cleaning up a mess? Was it the mafia trying to frame the Kennedys? Or was it simply a tragic, lonely end for a woman the world consumed? Marilyn's crypt is now pink from the lipstick kisses of fans, a shrine to a woman whose death is as iconic and debated as her life. It is the #1 grave of an actor lost in the shadow of a mystery that will likely never see the light.